Welcome back to Our Issues Milwaukee. I'm your host, Andrea Williams. If you are just joining us, our focus this morning has been on water. Robert Miranda is our next guest, and he's a well-known water activist with the Freshwater for Life Action Coalition. How are you, Robert?
Great, Andrea, thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure to have you here, and I invited you here today to talk about an issue that's been a concern for many years now, and since around 2016 or 2017, when the Milwaukee struggles with the lead abatement program became public. So before we get into that, if you would, for those who may not know, tell us more about the Freshwater Coalition, where you really work on things like this that are so important to the community.
Sure. The Freshwater for Life Action Coalition, FLAC for short, was born in 2016 to start addressing the issue of lead in water because of the continuing rise in lead poisoning, and noticing that a lot of that discussion around lead paint didn't include water. So we put together a team of experts on the issue of water and found that water is playing a pretty big role on this matter and needs to be talked about and brought up so that we could do something about it.
Mm-hmm. And the last time you were actually here was around 2017, and we had this very conversation. We discussed the resignation of then Health Commissioner Bevan Baker. Since then, we've had two other health commissioners. So if you would refresh our memories about the concerns you had back then, and in your opinion, if anything has changed.
Well, so yes, we had Dr. McManus, who came in after Baker, and she stayed only a few months before the city mayor went ahead and appointed Dr. Kowalik. Mm-hmm. And during those periods of time, we heard a lot of talk of reform, change, improvements, but we actually weren't seeing results. We weren't really seeing any changes happening. And our intuition, our gut feeling that no changes were happening really was exposed this past Thursday during the Milwaukee Common Council Public Safety and Health Committee meeting, in which a representative of the health department under this new leader, Commissioner Johnson, revealed that a March 2020 independent audit by the Public Health Foundation revealed that a lot of the protocols and policies and plans that were told to us a couple of years ago were never implemented.
Wow.
And so
go ahead.
That was a shock to us, but it wasn't a real big surprise to our group because we weren't seeing really a lot of changes going on. We were hearing a lot of rhetoric, but we weren't seeing the changes. And so when that was revealed on Thursday, we knew this was a mess.
Wow. And that's what I was going to say. Like, that surprises me that after all this time, we almost are right where we started. So we all kind of were in awe over the Flint, Michigan water situation. And of course, the circumstances are extremely different as far as how lead got into their water. But there have been experts that have said Milwaukee has a serious lead problem when it comes to the water, almost 100 times percent worse than other cities across the country, right?
And that is very true. And for Mayor Barrett to continue to be in denial of that raises a lot of questions for us because as we also found out just recently by this new health commissioner that just came in, we're also finding out that data in regards to water is very insufficient. In some cases, incomplete. So if you don't have enough data to show the dangers of water, how can the mayor be absolutely sure that lead paint is the primary source of poisoning in the city when he doesn't have the data needed in order to see where water is in the equation. And so it's really a very, very dangerous, serious situation many residents in the Milwaukee area are in, and not knowing the true nature of the poison that they're ingesting in their bodies via water.
Yeah, since 2017, the city has replaced more than 3,800 service lines out of the 70,000 that exist. And so with that said, you've got those thousands of homes that were built before 1951. They are receiving water through those lead laterals. And a recent assessment to replace the lead pipes and address safe drinking water infrastructure in Milwaukee and across Wisconsin has been estimated at $8.6 billion over the next 2 decades. That's pretty major.
It is a very major public works endeavor, but it also is a very serious, good investment for the city of Milwaukee. Mm-hmm. Because if we can rid our environment of this toxin, we can hopefully start seeing improvements in education, reduction of crime. Lead is poisoning the minds of our youth.
It's true.
And if we can reduce or remove it, hopefully in a generation or two, we'll start seeing and reaping in the benefits of that investment by having a lot of the social negative equations start lowering, and we start seeing more graduation rates go higher. Streets become much more safer. It's just the poison is messing up a lot of the minds of our children.
There's no question about that. The ingestion of lead is extremely dangerous. And then we have a number of children right here in the city that have tested positive for an elevated blood level. Do we have an update on those children who had been tested, where all the controversy came from, where their families had not been notified? Do we have an update on where we stand with that situation and the lead abatement program?
That update has never been presented to any of the committees that I know of. We do know that they have been going to the homes and talking with people and trying to reach out to people. But as far as their success rates and as far as them able to repair the damage done by the negligence that occurred for over 3 years, that was found out a couple of years ago, what happened in the health department that forced Bevan Baker to resign. We don't know if they were able to repair a lot of that damage. And that report hasn't come out yet.
Wow. So this particular organization, along with Get Out the Lead Coalition, you believe that these lead pipes need to be replaced at a much faster pace than the next 2 decades that have been cited. So talk a little bit about that.
Yes, we believe that they must be replaced faster than the 2 decades they talk about, because a lot of these pipes that are underground have been underground for over 120, 130, 40 years.
Wow.
They were first in the 1840s, 1850s. There are pipes in Walker's Point, Milwaukee, that have been put in the 1830s and 1840s. And so experts in the field of lead poisoning in the water and pipes say that pipes should be replaced every 60 to 70 years.
Wow.
So pipes have been underground and have passed the expiration date twofold. And so what is happening is within those pipes, no matter how much corrosion control you throw in the water to stop the pipes from corroding, the pipes have enough corrosion going on where there are tiny particles falling into the water. Mm-hmm. And even though they say when you flush, you get rid of the lead, the soluble part of the lead, which blends with the water, removes itself when you flush. But when the water is moving through the pipe, that's what causes the tiny particles that are aligning the walls of the pipe to fall into the water. And then that's what is being ingested by our children and being cooked in our food.
Wow.
And so it's important to remove these pipes now because of their age and the fact that, corrosion control doesn't stop the particles from falling into the water.
So you obviously are so passionate about this particular issue. What's the response that you get when you and other members of the coalition show up at meetings and you demand answers and you're looking for some sort of solution to these things that many people don't know about because really it doesn't get a lot of headlines when it comes to the media? Would you agree?
Yes, it doesn't get a lot of headlines because I think that it's because many of the journalists out there don't really get it. They don't understand the science and all of the chemicals in the water. And they really don't get it. And so what they do is they rely on city bureaucrats to give them information. And most of the time we found that a lot of that information is not totally accurate. And then they get a lot of this mantra from the mayor who keeps pushing them back to the lead paint, lead soil, and lead dust, which are important and need to be removed. But again, without the accurate data that is needed to show where water is in all of this debate, you can't say emphatically and with certainty, you cannot say that lead paint is the sole and primary concern that we must focus on. It has to be data that shows where everything is in the priority scheme. And so, yeah, we push for a lot of the focus to be on water because it needs to be debated. And when we do attend these meetings, people listen. I mean, we do get people who listen. But then again, when we leave, you have this administration that goes back and confuses and muddies up the issue again. And so, it's just a consistent battle with the Barrett administration to at least get to a point where we can sit down and try to figure this out in a way that will help us start putting a real effective campaign and plan to remove this toxic from our environment.
Yes, and before we run out of time, Mr. Miranda, have to talk to you. You recently took a bus with a number of individuals to Madison from Milwaukee to demand answers, something you've waited years for. So what was the outcome? Tell us about that trip.
We went there because we were part of the initial complaint to District Attorney John Chisholm to open up a criminal investigation on the mess of the lead program at City Hall. Mm-hmm. And that was in June of 2018. The district attorney said at that time he'll look into it. We went back to visit with District Attorney Chisholm in April of 2019. And he then at that time told us that they brought in retired prosecutors, all kinds of interns, to review all the documents and referred the whole case to the Department of Justice Attorney General's Office of Wisconsin. Now, that right there told us if he's going to refer to the DOJ, well, he sees something. You're just not going to send that whole thing to the DOJ to look at. Obviously, the DOJ has more resources and manpower to investigate further. So we met with the DOJ and we met with a Deputy Attorney General Wilson. And he told us that they were investigating and looking into this. And that was back in June of 2019. Since then, until that march we had on Friday of this year, July 16th, we heard nothing. And we went ahead and decided it's time for either the Department of Justice Attorney General call to either render a report of what's going on or charge people for misconduct and other malfeasance actions in office. But something has to happen because if he's not going to charge, then we need that report because our next step will go to the United States Attorney General and we're going to ask the federal government to investigate this.
Wow. So needless to say, a very complex situation. And I thank you for coming on to help us better understand what's going on. And more than anything, thank you for staying on top of the issue. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Andrea. Have a good day.
Absolutely. Robert Miranda is a spokesperson for Freshwater for Life Action Coalition. And for more information, you can visit their website at leadfreemke.com. That is going to do it for today's show. I'm your host, Andrea Williams. As always, thank you for watching, and I do hope you join us again next week as we take another look at our issues Milwaukee. Have a great day.